times, first time at Scarefest? First time? No on the corner? Cool. Alright guys. So, I'm going to do my best here not to kill our PowerPoint, but I make no promises. So, my name is Stephanie, and I've actually been able to see ghosts my entire life. It's sort of what led me into studying all the sort of weirdness when I went to college. So I got my bachelor's degree in history from Eastern Kentucky University, also have an anthropology degree from there, and then I have my master's degree from Kent State University, and I basically chose to study the paranormal to kind of piss off one of my professors. He basically told me that I could not do it, so I basically said, watch me. And that's exactly what I did. So, I was more than a little obsessed with Egypt as a child, which sort of led me to the idea of this presentation here. Like, unhealthily obsessed on some level with ancient Egypt, just everything about it I just wanted to be all over all the time. And I had a real, they used to call it a talent for Egyptian languages when I was very, very small. I would sit and read bits and pieces of them. Just things that I really shouldn't have been able to read, but little snippets of it that, for whatever reason, I could sort of make my way through. So I just started delving into that over and over again, and it led to that sort of idea of, cursed items. Because everybody's heard of mummy curses, right guys? Exactly. It's the most famous kind of curse there is. And by far, in my opinion, the best kind of curse there is. But there's lots of other curses. But in general, what is a curse? According to the dictionary, guys, I actually looked it up. It is a solemn utterance intended to evoke a supernatural power to inflict harm or punishment on someone or something. Literally, something you say to somebody to try and make something happen. It is a magic spell. That is all it really is, down at its basic concept. So, one of the most famous cursed items in the world, guys, is the Hope Diamond. Beautiful little stone there. Anybody ever seen it before? I've seen it. It's not even nearly that color in person. It is so much prettier than any picture I've ever seen actually sort of makes it look. It's a 45.52 carat blue diamond with about a 400-year history that we can sort of trace back through. It's now in possession of the Smithsonian and on display in a gorgeous little case by itself. And it was owned in the past by a bunch of very, very famous people. A couple of French kings, the Hope family, Harry Winston, Evelyn Walsh McLean, just a few of them that actually went through and actually owned this particular diamond. It wasn't always in this setting though, guys. It did have different ways you could be worn as a necklace or as a tiara, so it had a lot of different lights and things like that. So, the story that goes with the Hope Diamond sits there and tells us that it originally came from India, and it was part of a much larger stone. Now, the idea was that the curse came to those who owned or wore the jinn. And what the curse was, nobody was really entirely sure, just that bad things were going to happen. Doesn't really fit with that definition of a curse, but that's what people started talking about around this particular gemstone. And then there were some very sort of shaky claims that sit there and try and tell us that the jinn came originally from a statue of an Indian goddess. It was her third eye, essentially. Somebody stole it, took it back, and cut it down and made it into a Hope Diamond, essentially, or actually a French blue before that, and then to the Hope Diamond. But that seems like a good reason to curse something, right, guys? Don't steal things from idols. It's pretty basic, So, this is actually a list of people from the New York Times in 1911 who fell victim to the curse. This is what the New York Times told us in 1911, guys. So there are dozens of names there. One committed suicide, killed by the Russian Revolution, murdered by her sweetheart, that's always a good thing. Thrown from a precipice, along with wife and young child. Imprisoned and tortured, hanged by a mob, hanged for having, torn to pieces by wild dogs, abandoned, disgraced and died in prison, torn to pieces by another mob, died a ruined man, committed suicide, and died in misery and want. So, they were able to find a lot of people that they at least thought at the time had fallen prey to the curse of this Hope Diamond. So, the newer owners began to blame their misfortune on the history of this diamond and just basically picked out the diamond as the thing that they had that clearly was causing all the issues that they've ever had. The Smithsonian at this point has never seen any evidence of a curse from the diamond itself. They haven't had any bad luck since they had it. And that has given risen to some speculation that the curse may have actually been invented when they were trying to sell the diamond, to try and make it just a little bit more, flashy, a little bit neater on the market, and try and raise that value up just a smidge. So in general, I don't think the cursed diamond, or the Pope diamond, was actually cursed. I think it's a great story that people have connected a lot of large events to, but I don't think it is cursed in that traditional sense of, was it cursed? So, Chief Cornstalk. Anybody know who that is? Oh, come on, you've been there. Chief Cornstalk there, he was a Shawnee, a leader of the Shawnee Nation. He was actually very opposed to English settlement, but eventually became very on board with the terms of peace, and he led forces to the Battle of Point Pleasant. Anybody ring any bells there? Exactly, right? He's Mothman. Well, he's associated with Mothman. So, he was eventually murdered during peace talks at Fort Randolph, which was actually the location of Point Pleasant is now, and he was murdered by those he had gone to have peace talks with. So, he did not have a very good interaction at the end, which was really kind of sad because he was actively working towards peace between the natives and the European settlers that were coming in at the time. So, it's just a bad story all the way around. Now, Chief Cornstalk, after he was killed, was actually buried pretty much right there at the fort. So, in 1945, they actually moved his body and reburied them in Point Pleasant proper, as it is today. Probably not their best plan, guys. Now, reports later said that as the chief was dying, he laid a curse on the area of Point Pleasant and those that lived there. Not a very specific curse, but basically sort of damning everyone that lived in the area to some great misfortune in the future because they had betrayed him. Which I think sounds completely reasonable given the situation he was in, and does actually meet that original definition for a curse. He gave an utterance, at least by some reports, to actually sit down and try and hurt someone or something that came later. So they actually built a big monument in Point Pleasant. It's about 80 feet tall, I want to say. And it was struck by lightning twice in 1921, and the curse of Chief Cornstalk was, of course, blamed for that whole little thing there. Because given the monument was mainly for the European settlers, but it also honors those native fighters who also died in that particular battle. So, of course, the biggest connection there is this little guy right there, Mothman. So, there's a lot of negativity that's happened in Point Pleasant that has been attributed to the curse of Chief Cornstalk because it happened so much prior to everything else that's happened there. There was, of course, Mothman, who we all know about, right, guys? Flew around, terrorized people, killed dogs, made awful things, just in general was weird and creepy. He hunted in Point Pleasant for well over a year, and it ended, his last appearance was just before the collapse of the Silver Bridge. Now the Silver Bridge actually spanned across the Ohio River there, and when it fell, it was right near Christmas, and 46 people died when that bridge fell into the water. So people like to connect Chief Cornstalk with Mothman and then the falling in of that bridge because it happened very, very near where that Battle of Point Pleasant took place. So people like to try and make that connection happen. So, Chief Cornstalk, Mothman, Point Pleasant, is it cursed? Possibly. Very, very possibly in this one, in my opinion. I think there is a much better case here for there being a true curse than there is with the Hope Diamond being a truly cursed object. Now, after that, by far my favorite cursed object, well, person, I suppose, King Tut. We all know about King Tut, right, guys? Most famous mummy in the world, by far. So he's a son of Akhenaten, 18th dynasty pharaoh of, that's not Peoria, so I can't type, guys. Please ignore everything that's written up there. It's just a little bit of a typo there. He's an Amarna period pharaoh. And he basically tried to fix the mistake of his father. Akhenaten decided it would be a really great idea to take all the old Egyptian gods, roll them into one, and make it all worship the Aten. Problem with that, people really, really like their gods. That's why Akhenaten is now known as the heretic king. So when King Tut took over, or rather when King Tut's minders took over, because he was about 9 or so when he took over, 9, 10, something like that, they decided it was a good idea to try and bring back the old gods because they really did not want to deal with any sort of, civil war in Egypt. It'd be really bad. So they started bringing back the old Egyptian gods and trying to make things a little bit more like people had come to expect them to be, and just make it more normal for Egypt. So he ruled for about 10 years, died at about 18, possibly due to an accident or a war injury, or possibly due to a natural causes. It's just very hard to tell with him particularly how he died. But of course, King Tut's tomb was found basically intact. It had been robbed a couple of times in antiquity, but it was still basically an intact tomb, one of the more intact ones we've ever found. But it was not a normal tomb, not by far. It was very, very rushed, very, very quickly done, very, very shoddily done on some levels. The stuff that was in there was not made for him. The grand majority of it in there was made for a woman, then repurposed to come down for actually him. So they did not expect King Tut to die. They stuck him in what is probably the antechamber of a larger complex down there. So it was first entered and found by Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon. That is Lord Carnarvon there and his wife, or his daughter, and Howard Carter is the figure that's also in that picture. And the idea is that many people died directly after entering the tomb, including Carnarvon, who died just 5 months later. That's the story you've all heard, right, guys? Go inside the tomb, get the curse of the mummy, and we all die. That's what happens. Problem with that, though, guys, Lord Carnarvon, he was not the most healthy man to begin with. He had a lot of upper respiratory issues to begin with. He actually had a lot of things wrong with him. So the idea that he died of some sort of upper respiratory issue 5 months after going inside a tomb that had been sealed up for several thousand years with all kinds of germs inside there, yeah, probably. You know, not that hard of a stretch there. Now, of those who entered the tomb, only 8 died relatively quickly after the actual opening of the tomb. Lord Carnarvon's daughter actually lived another 57 years, and she went inside that tomb basically the same time her father did. And now the thing about this, Egyptians were fond of their curses, guys. We know that. We have written records of them actually placing curses on items. That little stela you see there is actually a curse. That is what it is. Egyptians were a very, very magical society. Most of their writings deal with their idea of magic and the afterlife and how you achieve things through this. And we know a large portion of their magic was done by vocalization. They talked it, they sang it. It was a ceremony that you did that was then written down or made right, or made visual, if you want to look at it that way, in their writings. So we don't have a lot of their curses written down, but then again, we don't have a lot of their magic written down. We have the remnants of it. So Egypt was a very magically oriented society. And what you're seeing there in the top corner, guys, that is actually a tomb curse. That was a brick that they went through and they wrote curses on and stuck up inside a little hole, essentially inside a tomb, to actually ward a tomb off from anybody who wanted to come in there and try and mess with said tomb, or go through and try and dig out whatever might be in there. Because tomb raiders at that time were a really, really big issue. They wanted the gold, they wanted all the valuables that were put inside the tomb to make the afterlife habitable for people. So in my opinion here, guys, King Tut, was he cursed? Absolutely. That was a society that believed in nothing more than going through and cursing objects to try to keep them safe, or trying to bless objects to keep them safe. It's what they did. So was there a curse on the tomb? Absolutely there was a curse on that tomb. They're not going to go through and have something like that. They're not going to try and protect in every way that they can. Even if it is a pharaoh who was the son of a heretic, who was trying to do better, but he was a child. There's only so much he could do at the time. So, was it cursed? Yeah, it was. Now, modern curses, they're still around, guys. They're fun little things you'll find every now and then. They can be found literally anywhere. You can find them, trust me, I found them in some really strange places, guys. And they can take a lot of forms. But they can happen to literally anyone, and they're not nearly as common as you would think, although you do find them occasionally in very, very strange spots. Now, because I'm weird, while I have been going through things, occasionally I will run across an object that somebody thinks is cursed, and they will hand it to me, and I'll take away for them, because why not? But this one here, I actually found at a half-price books, guys. You know, literally at a bookstore. And if you see right there on the cover, guys, they literally had it marked cursed in the case. Now, they did that because as they're going through there, when they brought this into their location, they started having all sorts of weird occurrences happening. Lights going on and off, things inside the case of this particular box falling over inside the case. The case, which had a key unlocking itself without the key, and just all sorts of weird stuff happening. So I was in there one day, and they're like, do you want them? And I was like, what? They're like, do you want to take the cursed cards? And I was like, I'll take them, yeah, I'm not opposed to it. And they're like, fine, get these out of here. There's too much going on here. And that's when I was sitting there thinking, you know, why do you think they're cursed? Why don't you think that there is a ghost haunting said cards? Because that was my first assumption, guys. We've got an object, it's had some stuff going on it. It clearly has a ghost attached to it or something like that weird is going on, so sure, I'll take it home with me, whatever. But why do you think it's cursed? So they decided these particular, actually very, very pretty tarot cards were cursed because the lady who had brought them in had told the girl who bought them, when she dropped them off, that she put a curse on them. She had cursed the cards because she wanted to give them to someone and essentially ruin their life. But the person that she tried to give them to wouldn't take them. So she gave them to Half Price Books. And Half Price Books then decided to sell them off. And then I walked in and was dumb enough to take them off their hands for them. So, legitimately cursed, but cursed in a very, very strange way. Not in the same sort of way like Chief Pornstock. He was literally cursing things for everybody that followed. Those cards right there have an intended target. So when you take them away from the intended targets, they're pretty harmless. Now Nora was playing with them earlier, and they still got a feel to them. You got to admit that.
I just whispered to him before you said it. I said there's an old lady with them now.
Yeah, there is an old lady, absolutely. You're not wrong. There is a ghost attached to the cards as well. But they're harmless when they are away from their intended targets.
Yeah.
Curses like that are exceedingly specific. So had you walked in and decided, oh, those are pretty, I'm going to buy them, it wouldn't have cursed you. It's not that kind of curse. It's not like walking into a mummy's tomb to say, hey, guess what, I'm an archaeologist, I'm totally going to take this, it'll be fine. That doesn't work so well, guys. It really, really doesn't. But that right there is an excellent way of getting cursed objects into museums, which happens, guys. I worked in museums for quite a while. You'd be surprised how much goes on in museums at night. That movie, Night Museum, not that far from the truth in some cases, guys. Really kind of funny. But one of the things that gets me about curses is that they can come in many different forms. Now, one of the first cursed objects I actually sort of got a hold of, but I really didn't get a hold of, came to me in college. Now, as I was in college, guys, my roommate's mother decided to go down on a mission trip to the Caribbean. She then decided to minister to a group who did not want to be ministered to, and then took a gift from them. She was good up until that last point right there. What she took back from this group was a string of wooden beads on a thread. And she brought them back with her because, oh, they've given these to me, it's all so sweet and nice and happy, and she brought them back. And then started having these really strange things happening in her house. Little feet running upstairs, little giggling noises, feels like someone's standing behind her on the stairs. She's getting really freaked out by this particular string of beads. So she gave them to her daughter, who brought them to our campus, who then decided the best place for them was underneath my bed. Yeah, and she didn't tell me they were there. So it was great, guys. So about the same time that those beads came to campus, now given I wasn't aware of this at the time, but I started getting these reports from some of my friends about this weird dream that they've been having. 3 or 4 people came to me individually talking about this strange dream where they're sitting there talking about having this little girl sitting at either the end of a bed or the end of like an old-fashioned bathtub, standing on the edge there, looking down and smiling at them. And that was the entirety of the dream. And they're like, it was terrifying. And I'm like, why? It's a little girl and she's smiling at me. What's so terrifying? You're like, I don't know, but it was terrifying. It was a nightmare. I woke up, I was really upset, and I wanted to tell you about it. First time I was like, that's a weird dream, go about your business. Second time I was like, that's not a good sign. And third time I was like, this is really, really bad, because I couldn't figure out what was going on. I didn't know what the common thread was. So I was on campus one weekend. It was at Eastern, guys, so it's a weekend campus. There's nobody there. I was going downstairs into the basement of the oldest building on campus, of course, to do my laundry. It's an extended flight of stairs. I had my laundry basket under one arm as I decided to go down these stairs here, get to about that first set of stairs, feel hands in the back of my leg, and I fall forward. I go about halfway down before I end up grabbing the banister so I do not kill myself falling down the stairs. My basket goes all the way down. But I stood up, turned around, and looked to the top of the stairs. And there, standing up there, was the cutest little kid I had ever seen. She's about this tall, dark eyes, dark hair, big smile, rose-colored nightgown on. Cutest thing you ever saw. And then I realized what was wrong. Same little girl described by my friends in their dreams. But when I looked at her face, I realized what was actually wrong. Her teeth were not teeth. They looked like a shark's teeth. Every single one of them were tiny and pointed, and she was so freaking excited by what she had just done. She was just excited that she could come through, and she had made that happen. I was her target, and I knew it, and she was so excited and just had that little kid energy, just that bubbly, excited, but she was evil. So in my mildly altered state at that point in time, I decided my best option at that point was to stand up, run to the top of the stairs, and grab her. I have no idea what I was going to do when I got her, but that was my entire goal. I was going to catch her, and I was going to make her pay for what she just did. Luckily for me, though, by the time I got to the top of the stairs, the little girl was gone, and I'd come to my senses. So I ended up running back to my dorm room and telling my friend, what just happened. And at that point, my roommate was like, oh yeah, so my mom's been having this weird stuff happen, and these beads were attached to it, and yeah, we put them under your bed. And I was like, great, that is so helpful, so very helpful here. But at least now we had the culprit. And by process of elimination, talking to her mother right after that, we found out the activity had followed from the Caribbean to her house and out to campus, all where those beads went. The little girl was literally connected to the beads. So after doing a little bit of research, I kind of figured out what was going on. The people that had been ministered to really did not want that happening. But they had their own tribal beliefs of these sort of water spirits that could come in and essentially protect their area, keep out things that they don't want in. So it is actually a known tradition there to send these spirits after people in literally a cursed form. In this particular form, a cursed object. So the best thing to do is to destroy the object itself so that they have nothing to bind themselves to and they have to go back to where they come from. Problem with that though, guys, we were on a college campus. We couldn't dig anything up, we couldn't burn anything, so we had to do the only thing we could do. We took those beads, tied them to a rock, and threw them into the bottom of the Kentucky River. So she can now hunt a catfish, but no people down there. Essentially, the beads are going to destroy themselves and she'll eventually go back to where she came from. But there's nothing else you could have done at that point. It was a cursed object that had been brought here that we could not send back. Now, guys, sending a cursed object back is an excellent idea. I've gotten people calling me, actually emailing me back and forth, where they have taken items from places they were told not to take items from, specifically seashells. And don't take them to this beach. No, we took them, it's fine. And they'll send me these emails about how, well, I took this thing and I've had this fire and my car is broken and I lost my job. Do you think it's probably this thing? And I'm like, well, if everything else is the same, you might want to send the seashell back just to be safe. And I'll send that email back and they'll email me back and they'll be like, no, it was our souvenir of this really great trip we went on, so I don't want to do that. And I'm like, well, all right, but that's your best option. It really, really is. So the same person emailed me back again a couple months later. So I've broken my leg, my wife has divorced me, I'm living out of a storage unit at this point basically. Do you think it's the seashell? I told you that earlier. Yes, I still think it's the seashell. I think you should send it back. And then they eventually say, okay, how do I send it back? I'm like, really? How do you send it back? You put it in a box, you give it an apology, write out the apology. Just like a curse, you want to try and undo it the other way, that's what you want to do. You want to essentially apologize for what you did. So if you took the item after you're told not to, write that apology down, put it in a box, don't put a return address on it, and send it back to the beach. Just address it to the beach. There's no return address, it can't come back to you. So send it there, let the post office deal with it. Eventually they listened to me, and things stopped happening to them. it's just one of those things, guys. You've got to use your head a little bit when you're dealing with objects that you think might be cursed. Don't keep them. If you think they're cursed, get rid of them immediately, guys. It's really better for all involved. But basically, what not to do. From the things that I have seen personally, what not to do. Don't take objects from people that say that they're cursed. It's really pretty straightforward. If they say they're cursed, don't take them. It's a bad idea. Also, don't believe every bad activity is or every bad occurrence is a curse, because they're actually pretty rare. They do happen occasionally, but more often than not, what you're dealing with is either actual bad luck or something else entirely. Not every evil thing out there is going to have been a curse. Yeah, don't take or accept gifts from people if it feels wrong. There's probably a reason that it feels wrong. Everybody does have that intuition inside them that allows them to know what is yes and what is no and things like that. You know, just don't do anything squirrely. And if you do get it, try and send it back. Just get it away from you as best as possible. Get it to somebody who will not be affected by it, or get it to somewhere where it came from, essentially. Lots of things happen like that with sand and with pieces of old ghost towns and things like that. Just get it back to where they started out. Just don't mess with them here. So, guys, any questions? Yes, Nick.
So you were, excuse me. So you were talking about the cursed beads, and it was a curse from the Caribbean. Why do you think it took the form of such a non-Caribbean entity?
Because of who it was given to. Essentially, I think she was trying to be as non-threatening as possible, to try and ingratiate herself with who was around her, to try and make it more effective, if you will.
Okay.
But she couldn't do it completely, which is why she ended up with the shark teeth. Even though my friends couldn't remember those when she was coming to them in the dreams.
Okay. Thank
That's my opinion anyways. Yes, ma'am.
Have they come in contact with the beads, the ones that told you about the dream?
They had not. They were in the same building as us, but they had not come in physical contact with the beads. But they were in exceedingly close proximity to them, as in like a floor either way, up and down. And they were all in the same wing as we were in the dorm. So it was very much exactly what it was. There was no two ways about it. They were lost from that. Yes, ma'am?
If Howard Carter was the first one to enter Text 2, why was he not first?
That's a very good question. It's one of those things. Howard Carter had a much hardier constitution than Lord Carnarvon did to begin with. If a curse has been sitting dormant for several thousand years, no energy being put towards it, it's likely going to attack the weakest members first, just like you do if you're going to, you're lying, out hunting. You're going to go after the weakest member first, which unfortunately for Lord Carnarvon was going to be him. Any other questions, guys? Thank you so much for coming out and seeing me today.
Yay.